A widowed millionaire decides to take his daughters to a humble diner and order the cheapest dish, seeking to teach them the value of humility. The waitress, sensing the situation and moved by a rare empathy, offers extra food even knowing it would come out of her own pocket. But her gesture becomes even more powerful when he discovers that his company is on the verge of destroying the very diner where she works. And it's this unexpected reaction of pure humanity that pushes the millionaire toward the decision that would change her life, his daughters' lives, and his own, forever. Richard Sterling ran a hand over his tired face as he observed his reflection in the bathroom mirror. There was something strange about seeing himself there. At that moment on a Saturday morning, wearing a faded shirt he bought at a thrift store on South Halsted Street in Pilsen. The garment had yellowed stains under the arms and a small tear near the pocket. The jeans were worn at the knees, and the sneakers he had on were no longer their original white color. They seemed to have endured years of intense use, when in fact he had acquired them just 2 days before, purposefully choosing the most scuffed pair on the shelf. His fingers trembled slightly as he buttoned the shirt. It wasn't nervousness. It was something deeper, a mixture of determination and fear of the unknown. It had been 3 months since Eleanor was gone, taken by that terrible accident on Lakeshore Drive. 3 months since his world had collapsed. 3 months of trying to understand how to move forward as a father to 2 little girls who asked every night when Mommy would come back from heaven. Richard was 42 and had built an empire. Sterling Corporate was one of the largest real estate investment holdings in the country, with projects spread across 15 states. He had penthouse apartments, imported cars, a team of staff dedicated solely to making his life and the girls' lives easier. But none of it could fill the void Eleanor had left. None of it stopped him from waking up sweating every night, with the feeling of suffocating amidst so many material possessions that seemed increasingly insignificant. In recent weeks, something had changed within him. A growing restlessness, an urgent need to answer questions he didn't even know how to formulate properly. Was he raising his daughters the right way? Were Amelia and Clara, at just 6 and 5 years old respectively, already being shaped by the bubble of privilege in which they lived? They had never known need, never seen the world beyond the high walls of their luxury condo in Lincoln Park. To them, everyone had a driver, maids, and could buy any toy they desired. The idea began as an absurd thought during a sleepless night. What if he could teach the girls something that no expensive private school could? What if he could show them how most people really lived? What if he could test not only the humanity of the world out there, but also his own ability to reconnect with it? Richard left the bathroom and walked down the wide hallway of his apartment. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, each worth more than a family car. His footsteps echoed on the imported marble floor. He reached the girls' room and opened the door slowly. Amelia and Clara were still asleep, hugging each other in the 4-poster bed that Eleanor had personally chosen. They were so small, so innocent. Their peaceful faces in sleep made him question again if he was making the right decision. But it was necessary, for them, for him, for the memory of Eleanor, who had always spoken of teaching their daughters values, of not letting them grow up alienated from reality. She came from a humble family in a small town in Illinois. She knew the struggle. Richard, on the other hand, was the only son of already successful entrepreneurs. He had never experienced real hardship. Perhaps that was why he felt so lost now. He knelt beside the bed and gently touched Amelia's shoulder. The girl opened her brown eyes just like her mother's and smiled when she saw him. Clara woke up soon after, rubbing her little eyes with her fists. "Daddy," said Amelia, still sleepy. "Is it late?" "No, my love. But today we're going to do something different, something special." "An outing?" asked Clara, immediately perking up. Richard smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that the girls rarely saw. "We're going out, yes. But first, I need you to put on very simple clothes. No pretty dresses today, no bows in your hair. We're going to pretend we're other people for a day." The girls looked at each other, confused but intrigued. Amelia frowned, trying to understand. "Play pretend?" she asked. "That's right," her father replied. We're going to pretend we're a different family. A family that doesn't have much money, that has to be careful with every penny. Are you in? Clara clapped her hands, already getting into the game. Yes, like in the story of Cinderella before she went to the ball. Richard laughed, despite the pain tightening his chest. Something like that. But this game is important. I want you to pay attention to everything we're going to see and do today, okay? And then we'll talk about it. He helped them choose the simplest clothes they had, although even these were from expensive brands. Still, he managed to put together discreet outfits, plain jeans and solid-colored t-shirts. He tied Amelia's hair in a simple braid and Clara's in a ponytail. No imported headbands or patent leather shoes. Today, it would be simple canvas sneakers. Mrs. Gable, the governess who had cared for the girls since they were born, appeared at the bedroom door with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, aren't they having breakfast? I've prepared everything." "Not today, Mrs. Gable. We're leaving early and eating out." The woman blinked, surprised. "Out, sir. But at least let me prepare something for them to take." "No need. It will be good for them to try something different." Mrs. Gable had known her employer long enough to know when not to insist, but her eyes revealed concern as she watched the trio prepare to leave. "Will you be taking the car, sir?" she asked, hopeful. Richard shook his head. "We're taking the L train." "The L train?" The words came out almost as a muffled cry. The girls had never been on public transportation. Mrs. Gable discreetly made the sign of the cross but said nothing more. Minutes later, the three were in the building's garage. Richard looked at his cars lined up. The Mercedes, the BMW, the armored SUV. He walked past all of them and headed for the exit, holding his daughter's little hands. The doorman almost dropped his coffee cup when he saw them. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Are you going out like this? On foot?" "We are, Gerald. A different kind of day." On the sidewalk, the October sun beat down hard on Chicago. The air was thick, with the city's characteristic pollution mixed with the smell of a bakery on the corner. Amelia and Clara looked at everything with wide eyes, as if they were on another planet. They were used to going from the house to the car in the closed garage, from the car to the school's garage or the mall's, walking on the street, feeling the warm concrete under their feet. Hearing the noise of traffic without the protection of bulletproof windows was a completely new experience. "Daddy, why are there so many people?" asked Clara, squeezing her father's hand tighter. "Because this is how most people live, my daughter. Walking, taking the bus, the train, the world is big and full of people." They walked 3 blocks to the nearest L station. Richard bought the tickets and taught the girls how to go through the turnstile. The station tunnel echoed with voices, hurried footsteps, the screech of trains arriving and departing. Clara held Amelia's hand with her other hand, forming a chain among the 3 of them. Inside the car, it was relatively empty for a Saturday morning, but there were still enough people to make the girls huddle against their father. An elderly lady got on at the next station, carrying heavy bags. Richard touched Amelia's shoulder and pointed to the woman. Amelia understood immediately and stood up, offering her seat. "Thank you, dear," the lady said, with a tired but genuine smile. "What a polite little girl." Amelia's smile lit up the entire car. It was the first time someone outside her close circle had praised something she did. At the private school they attended, everything was expected, programmed. There, in that simple gesture, there was real recognition. Richard watched everything attentively. Each of his daughter's reactions, each discovery, each moment of surprise. They got off at the Pilsen station and came up to the surface. The neighborhood was bustling with Saturday commerce. Street vendors sold everything on the sidewalks. Fabric stores displayed colorful rolls in their windows. The smell of hot dogs came from a stand on the corner. Amelia pointed to a window full of cheap toys. "Daddy, can I look?" "Not today, my love. Remember our game? Today we have to save every dollar." Clara pouted but didn't insist. Richard felt a pang of guilt but moved on. They walked through streets he had never set foot on, despite living in Chicago his whole life. It was incredible how the city had parallel worlds that never touched. Just a few miles from his luxury apartment, there was this hard-working, sweaty, noisy Chicago, completely oblivious to the existence of people like him. Finally, they reached their destination, a small corner diner with formica tables patched with duct tape and chairs that no longer matched. The sign just said, "Vera's Diner," hand-painted in uneven letters. The place was busy with workers having their meal before starting their shift, humble families enjoying a rare moment of eating out. Richard pushed the door open and entered with the girls. The noise of plates, cutlery, and conversations immediately enveloped them. The smell of home-cooked food, fresh coffee, and frying oil filled the air. They found a table in the corner and sat on the uncomfortable chairs. Amelia looked around with curiosity, while Clara snuggled against her father, still insecure in this unfamiliar environment. A young woman approached, carrying 2 greasy, laminated menus. She had the tired face of someone who works too much, deep dark circles under her eyes, but she still smiled when she saw them. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" Richard took the menu and pretended to study it carefully, although he already knew exactly what he was going to order. He had planned every detail of that day. He looked at the prices, the cheapest dishes, mentally calculated what the minimum necessary amount would be. "I'll have 2 fried eggs with a piece of toast, and 3 glasses of water, please." The waitress, whose torn name tag identified her as Sarah, looked at the 2 little girls and then back at him. "Just that?" she asked, not hiding her surprise. "It's what we can afford today," Richard replied, lowering his voice and looking away with a shame he didn't have to feign. It was real, but for different reasons than she imagined. Sarah bit her lower lip, her eyes scanning the girls again. Amelia and Clara were clearly well cared for children, despite their simple clothes. They had that health that comes from good nutrition, that spark in their eyes of someone who is loved. But here they were, about to share 2 fried eggs and a piece of toast for a meal. "All right," she said finally, writing down the order. "I'll be right back." As she walked away, Richard held his daughter's hands on the table. "Girls, are you understanding our game?" Amelia nodded, but Clara seemed confused. "Daddy, why are we only eating 2 eggs? I'm really hungry." "I know, my love, but today we're learning what it's like when people can't buy everything they want. Many children in the world eat like this every day, or even less." "Less than 2 eggs?" Amelia's voice came out small, incredulous. "Much less," Richard confirmed, feeling the weight of his own words. "That's why we need to be grateful for everything we have, and we always need to be kind to everyone, because we never know the struggles each person is facing." The girls fell silent, processing this with the seriousness only children can have when they realize something important is happening. Richard looked around the diner, observing the people. A man in a security guard uniform ate quickly, probably between shifts. A family with 3 children shared 2 large plates, the parents barely eating to ensure their children were satisfied. An elderly couple had coffee and bread, their wrinkled hands intertwined on the table, a gesture of intimacy that survived hardship. There was life here, struggle, exhaustion, but also dignity and love. Richard wondered, when was the last time he had truly looked at the world like this, without the filters of his armored cars and isolated apartments? He wondered what Eleanor would say if she saw him there, finally doing something she had always suggested, teaching their daughters that the world was bigger than their privileges. Sarah returned a few minutes later, carrying a tray. She placed a plate with 2 perfect fried eggs and a golden piece of toast on the table. The 3 glasses of water followed, but then, almost imperceptibly, she added more things: 2 extra bread rolls, a banana and an apple, and 2 glasses of milk. "This is on the house," she said quickly, before Richard could protest. "For the girls. The house always offers something extra for the kids, okay?" Richard opened his mouth to say something, but Sarah was already moving away, attending to another table. He looked at the additional food, feeling something tighten in his throat. It wasn't pity. It was pure kindness, coming from someone who clearly didn't have much to give, but gave anyway. Amelia and Clara picked up the bread rolls with eyes shining, with gratitude, as if it were the greatest treasure. They began to eat slowly, savoring each bite in a way they never did at home, where food was abundant and guaranteed. Richard divided the eggs between them, keeping only a small piece of toast for himself. As they ate, he watched Sarah work. She moved through the diner with tired efficiency, waiting tables, taking orders, cleaning surfaces. But there was something more in her gestures, genuine attention to each customer, a real smile for each person, a kind word even when she was clearly exhausted. "Daddy," whispered Clara, "that lady is very nice, isn't she?" "Very," Richard agreed, feeling that the lesson he had planned to teach was revealing itself in ways he hadn't even anticipated. The world was about to teach him something too. The diner gradually filled up. Workers came in for a hearty breakfast before facing another Saturday of labor. The noise of conversations mingled with the sound of the frying pan in the kitchen and the clinking of cups. Richard observed everything with an attention he rarely dedicated to the world around him. He was used to meetings in glass-walled rooms, lunches in Michelin-starred restaurants, where silence was broken only by whispered conversations about business. This was different. This had a pulsating, real, unfiltered life. Amelia chewed her piece of bread slowly, watching the other children in the diner. A girl of about 8 was helping her mother take care of a baby while they ate, rocking the little one with a naturalness Amelia had never had. Clara sipped the milk Sarah had brought, her eyes glued to the waitress who never stopped moving. The diner door swung open forcefully and a man entered. He wore an expensive suit, a silk tie, and Italian shoes that shone even under the dim light of the establishment. His dark sunglasses remained on his face as he looked around with an expression of clear disgust. Richard recognized him immediately. Marcus Thorne, director of real estate expansion for a rival company. They had crossed paths at auctions and negotiations. The man was known for his arrogance and lack of scruples. Marcus chose a table in the center of the diner, sitting down with exaggerated movements as if the chairs were contaminated. He tapped his fingers on the table impatiently until Sarah approached with a menu. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" Marcus didn't even look at her. "Espresso, double. And tell me, does this place serve real food or just this greasy spoon crap?" Sarah maintained a professional smile, but Richard noticed the tension in her shoulders. "We have home-cooked food, sir, dishes made to order. I can recommend the—" "I didn't ask for your opinion," Marcus interrupted, finally taking off his glasses and looking at her with contempt. "Just bring the coffee, and make it quick. I don't have all day." The waitress nodded and retreated. Richard felt anger boil inside him. He knew men like Marcus. In fact, until recently, he might not have been so different from them. How many times had he treated people with indifference? How many times had he forgotten that behind every uniform, every name tag, there was a whole story? "Daddy," whispered Amelia. "Why was that man rude to the lady?" "Because some people think they're better than others just because they have money," Richard replied in a low voice. "But that's wrong. Very wrong." Marcus continued to complain loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "What a horrible place. I don't even know what I'm doing. Here, I should have gone to the hotel to eat." A lady at the next table commented to her husband, "Then why don't you go? Nobody asked him to come." Marcus heard and turned to her with a sharp look. "Excuse me? Were you talking to me?" "No, sir. I was talking to my husband. But since you heard if the place doesn't please you, you know where the door is." The man huffed but didn't reply, going back to fiddling with his phone with abrupt movements. Sarah brought the coffee, and he took a sip, making a face. "Is this what you call coffee? Dirty water, bring me sugar. A lot of it." While this was happening, Richard noticed movement in the kitchen. An older woman with grey hair tied in a bun appeared for a moment. It must be Vera, the owner of the place. She watched Marcus with a tired expression, like someone who had seen many like him before. The girls finished eating, and Richard gently wiped the corners of their mouths with a napkin. "Are you full?" he asked. "Yes, Daddy," replied Amelia. "The lady was very kind to bring the roll and the milk." "She really was," agreed Clara. "When we go home, can I give her my stuffed rabbit as a present?" Richard's heart ached. The natural generosity of his daughters, not yet corrupted by anything, was beautiful to see. "I think she would be very happy, but maybe we can think of something more useful for her, okay?" At that moment, Marcus stood up abruptly, the chair scraping on the floor. He looked around, and his eyes landed on Richard's table with the girls. An expression of disdain crossed his face. "Wow, how lovely," he said loudly, sarcastically. "A family man bringing his little girls to eat in a place like this. Can't even feed the poor things properly. 2 fried eggs? Is that all you can give your daughters?" The entire diner fell silent. All eyes turned to Richard's table. Amelia shrank in her chair, feeling the hostility even without fully understanding. Clara grabbed her father's arm, frightened. Richard felt the blood rush to his head, but he forced himself to remain calm. "That's none of your business, sir." "Oh, it's not." Marcus took a few steps toward their table. "You know what I think? I think it's absurd for a man who clearly can't afford it to bring children to be embarrassed in a place like this. Just look at you. Those horrible clothes, these beautiful girls wasted on a father who can't even buy them a decent meal. It's sad, really." "Sir, please," Sarah began, approaching quickly. Marcus ignored her completely. "If I were you," he continued, pointing at Richard, "I'd be ashamed. Children need proper nutrition, not crumbs. But this is what happens when people who have no stability decide to have kids. Irresponsible." Amelia started to cry softly. Clara hid her face in her father's arm. Richard was about to explode, to reveal who he really was and put this miserable man in his place. But before he could open his mouth, Sarah placed herself between Marcus and their table. "You're going to stop now," she said, and her voice was low but as firm as steel. Marcus laughed. "Or what? A diner waitress is going to give me a lecture? No. A decent person is going to ask you to have some respect or leave, immediately." "Listen here," Marcus began, approaching her intimidatingly. But Sarah didn't back down an inch. "No, you're the one who's going to listen. This man came in here, sat with his daughters, ordered the food he could afford, and is treating them with love and respect, something you clearly don't know how to do with anyone. He has more dignity in his little finger than you have in that whole expensive suit. How dare you—" Marcus's face was red now. "How dare I? How dare you humiliate a father in front of his young daughters? These girls are well cared for, clean, polite. If he's going through hard times now, that's no reason for anyone to humiliate him. Life has its ups and downs, sir. Today you're all high and mighty. Tomorrow you could be the one needing help." "This is ridiculous. I'll never—" "You'll never know," Sarah interrupted him, "because people like you live in a bubble. But I know struggle. I know hard work. And I recognize a good father when I see one. Now you have 2 choices. Pay for your coffee, apologize and leave, or leave without paying, and I'll call my uncle who's a cop and is 2 blocks away. Your choice." The entire diner seemed to have stopped breathing. Marcus looked around and realized that everyone there was looking at him with antipathy. The lady who had commented earlier was on her feet, ready to intervene if necessary. 2 men at a corner table also stood up. "This is absurd," Marcus muttered, but his voice no longer had the same force. He threw a $50 bill on the table. "Keep the change, you'll need it more than I do." "We don't want your money," Sarah said coldly. "The coffee was $5. Take the rest." Marcus looked at her with pure hatred, but he took the bill back and threw a 10 in its place. Then he turned to Richard one last time. "You should be ashamed," he said before stomping out. The door closed behind him and the diner erupted in murmurs. The lady who had spoken up before came to Richard's table. "Don't mind that man, dear. You're doing a good job with these beautiful girls." Other people nodded in agreement. A gentleman raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. Sarah was still beside the table, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Richard looked at her with a mixture of admiration and something else he couldn't name. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Sarah knelt beside the table at the girl's eye level. "Hey, you two. Don't listen to what that man said, okay? Your dad loves you. I can see that. And love is worth more than any amount of money in the world." Amelia wiped her tears and nodded. Clara reached out her little hand and touched Sarah's face. "You're pretty," she said. "On the inside." Sarah smiled, her eyes welling up. "You two are too, sweethearts, inside and out." She stood up and went back to work. But Richard sat there, processing what had just happened. The experience he had planned to teach his daughters about humanity and empathy was turning out to be much deeper than he had imagined. Sarah hadn't defended a wealthy, disguised client. She had defended someone she believed was in trouble, someone vulnerable with nothing to gain from it. On the contrary, she could have lost her job if Marcus had been an important customer or made a bigger scene. She had done it because it was right. Simple as that. Richard looked at his daughters and saw that they were also processing everything. "Girls," he said quietly, "you just saw something very special. You saw real courage. You saw someone defend another person even while taking risks. That's real heroism, not the superheroes in cartoons." "Daddy," asked Amelia, "why does the world have bad people like that man and good people like Sarah?" "Because the world has all kinds of people, my daughter, and that's why it's so important to always try to be like Sarah, not like that man. Do you understand?" The two nodded solemnly. Richard asked for the check, and when Sarah brought it, he left a generous tip, but not so much that it would arouse suspicion. As they left, he looked back one last time. Sarah was serving another table, smiling at an elderly couple, her movements already returning to the tired but steady rhythm of work. There was something about her, a strength that came from within, tempered by hardships Richard could only imagine, and for the first time in months, since he had lost Eleanor, he felt something other than pain and emptiness. He felt hope. Hope that there was still real goodness in the world, and that his daughters could learn to recognize it and cultivate it. Richard and the girls walked the streets of Pilsen for almost an hour after leaving the diner. The sun was high now, and the October heat made the walk tiring. Amelia and Clara complained of sore feet, unaccustomed to walking so much. Normally they were driven everywhere. The longest distance they walked was from the parking lot to the entrance of a mall. "Daddy, my feet hurt," complained Clara, pouting. "I know, my daughter, but we need to take the L train back, just a little further." "But isn't the station nearby?" asked Amelia, confused. "No, it's still a few blocks away. People who don't have cars have to walk a lot every day, to work, to the grocery store, for everything." The girls exchanged glances, beginning to understand in a practical way what it meant not to have the conveniences they had always taken for granted. Every sore step, every drop of sweat, every complaint from tired muscles was a lesson no book could teach. When they finally reached the station, Richard bought water for all three. They sat on a platform bench waiting for the next train. Clara rested her head on her father's, arm exhausted. Amelia watched the people coming and going, each with their own story, their destiny, their invisible struggles. "Daddy," Amelia began suddenly, "are we going back to that diner?" "Why, my love?" "I want to see the lady again. Sarah. She was so nice to us." Richard smiled and stroked his daughter's hair. "We will, I promise." The train arrived crowded, and they squeezed inside. Richard held the girls tightly, protecting them from the crowd. The smell of mixed perfumes, sweat, and fatigue filled the car. Clara made a face but said nothing. She was beginning to understand that complaining wouldn't change the situation. When they arrived home almost at noon, Mrs. Gable received them with visible relief. "Thank goodness, I was so worried. The girls must be starving." "Actually, Mrs. Gable, we've already eaten." "And it was a very good morning," Richard replied. The governess looked at their simple clothes, their sweaty and tired faces, and shook her head without understanding. But she prepared baths for the girls and helped them get clean, while Richard went to his room. He looked at himself in the mirror, still wearing those thrift store clothes, and saw a different man looking back. He couldn't explain exactly what had changed, but something definitely had. That night, after the girls were asleep, Richard sat in his office. The walls were lined with diplomas, awards, photos with politicians and celebrities. A whole life of material achievements looked down at him from golden frames. But he felt empty. He turned on his computer and started searching. Vera's Diner. He found a few online reviews, mostly positive, praising the home-cooked food and warm service. But he also found something that chilled him to the bone, a news item from 2 weeks ago on a small neighborhood. Blog. Traditional Pilsen establishments face eviction threat due to urban renewal project. Richard clicked and read. The article detailed how a large development company was buying up properties in the area to build a modern commercial complex. Several small businesses were being forced to close or pay exorbitant amounts to stay. Vera's diner was specifically mentioned as one of the places at risk. Feeling a tightness in his chest, Richard opened his own company's files. He searched for recent expansion projects, partnerships, investments, and there it was. Sterling Corporate was one of the main investors in the Pilsen Renewal Project. It had invested $20 million in the venture. He didn't follow all the details of every project. He delegated a lot to his vice presidents and directors. But now, looking at the documents, he saw it clearly. His company was profiting from the desperation of people like Vera. People like Sarah, who would lose their jobs when the diner closed. Richard ran a hand over his face, feeling nauseous. How many other projects like this was his company involved in? How many lives were being destroyed to increase his profits? He had always told himself it was just business, that the real estate market was like that he couldn't do anything. But could he really not? He thought of Sarah, of how she had defended him, and the girls without knowing who they were. He thought of the cruel irony. The woman who had shown such humanity to him was about to lose her job because of him. The company he had built was destroying the very kind of place and person his daughters needed to know. Eleanor would have been horrified. She always questioned the company's practices, always suggested more ethical ways of doing business. Richard used to say she didn't understand how the corporate world worked, but maybe she understood something much more important that he was just beginning to grasp. Over the next few days, Richard continued his normal life, but something was different. In business meetings, he heard himself speaking differently. He questioned more, asked about the social impact of projects, annoyed his directors with questions about the people affected by the expansions. They looked at him, confused. After all, this wasn't how it had always worked. The girls were different too. Amelia started noticing the people around them more, the building's security guards, the school's receptionists. Clara asked more about how things worked, where the food came from, who made the clothes. Mrs. Gable commented that she had never seen the girls so curious and aware. A week after the visit to the diner, Richard made a decision. On a Saturday morning, he put on the thrift store clothes again and took the girls back to Pilsen. This time, the way seemed less strange. The girls complained less about walking, waving at the hot dog vendor they recognized from the previous week. When they entered Vera's diner, Sarah was waiting on a table. She looked up and her face lit up when she recognized them. "You came back," she said, smiling broadly. "We promised we would," Richard replied. They sat at the same table as before. Sarah brought the menus, but Richard shook his head. "Today, I want something different. What do you recommend?" She seemed surprised but pleased. "Vera made a wonderful beef stew today. It's a good portion, enough for 3 people easily." "Then it's the beef stew." While they waited, Richard watched Sarah more closely. He noticed she limped slightly when she walked, as if her feet hurt. The dark circles under her eyes were even deeper than the week before. When she brought the food, he asked, "Do you work here every day?" "Almost every day," she replied, serving generous portions for each of them. "I do double shifts when I can, lunch and dinner." "Isn't that very tiring?" She shrugged. "It's what needs to be done. My mum's sick, the treatments are expensive, and I still study at night. I'm in college for business administration. It's tough, but it'll be worth it." Richard felt admiration grow within him. "Business administration?" "That's right. 2nd year. I want to open my own business one day. Something that helps the community, you know? Maybe a community center with vocational courses. There are so many people here who want to work but don't have the skills." "That's a beautiful dream," Richard said sincerely. Amelia and Clara ate the stew with appetite, approving of every spoonful. The food was truly delicious, seasoned with that care that only home cooking has. Richard ate too, savoring not just the ingredients, but the entire meaning of that meal. In the middle of lunch, Vera came out of the kitchen. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s, with an apron stained with sauce and a tired but genuine smile. She went around the tables greeting customers, stopping to chat here and there. When she reached Richard's table, Sarah introduced them. "Vera, these are the customers I told you about. The father and the beautiful girls. Oh yes, the restaurant owner extended her hand to Richard. A pleasure, dear. Sarah told me about the situation last week. What a ridiculous man, right? But she sent him packing. Richard shook her hand, noticing the calluses from years of hard work. The food is wonderful, Vera. Congratulations. Glad you like it. This diner is my whole life. My late husband and I opened it here 30 years ago. He always said that good food cures everything, even a broken heart. He was right, Richard murmured. After Vera returned to the kitchen, Richard hesitated but decided to ask, Sarah, is it true the diner is in trouble? The waitress stopped cleaning the next table and looked at him, surprised. How do you know? I read something online about the urban renewal project. Sarah's face fell, sadness clouding her previously cheerful eyes. It's true. The development company wants to buy the whole building. They've already bought most of the properties on the block. They offered Vera a ridiculous price far below market value. She refused, but now they're using other tactics. They've raised the rent absurdly, created problems with the city, even made veiled threats. That's terrible, Richard said, and he wasn't faking his indignation. It's exactly the kind of thing that big companies do, Sarah completed with bitterness. I know. They don't care about people, only about profit. Vera built a life here. This place feeds the community, but to them it's just another lot, another project. What are you going to do? She shrugged, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't know if there's much we can do. Vera is trying to get a loan to pay what they're asking, but no bank will lend to her. They say it's a high risk because the whole area is going to be demolished anyway. It's like they've decided our fate and we're just waiting for it to happen. Richard clenched his fists under the table. There had to be a way to fix this. There had to be a way for him to use all his power and resources to save this place, these people. But he couldn't just reveal who he was and solve everything. That would be too easy. Besides, something told him he needed to understand the situation more deeply before acting. Sarah, he said suddenly, can you give me the full address of the diner? I want to come back more often. And who knows, I can spread the word, bring more customers. She smiled, touched by the offer. Of course, any help is welcome. As she jotted down the information on a napkin, Clara tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, can we help save the diner? Like how heroes save people? Richard looked at his little daughter, her eyes full of innocence and a genuine desire to do good. We'll try, Princess, we'll try. The following Monday, Richard arrived at his office with a determination he hadn't felt in months. His corporate building was on Michigan Avenue, a giant of glass and steel that reflected the gray Chicago sky. He greeted the receptionist, entered his private elevator, and went straight up to the 40th floor where his presidential suite was located. Good morning, Mr. Sterling, greeted Christine, his executive, secretary of 15 years. You have a board meeting at 10 and lunch with the investors from the Oak Park project at noon. Cancel the lunch and summon the vice presidents of expansion and development for a meeting at 2 p.m. I want everyone there. Christine blinked, surprised. Everyone, sir? That's 12 executives. Everyone. She made a quick note. Any specific problem? Several problems, but we'll discuss them in the meeting. Richard entered his office and went straight to his computer. He spent the next few hours immersed in documents, spreadsheets, contracts. He examined every detail of the Pilsen renewal project, how much his company was investing, what the projected profits were, which properties were being acquired and by what methods, and what he discovered made him increasingly nauseous. His company, Sterling Corporate, wasn't just a passive investor. It was an active partner in the development firm that was destroying that neighborhood. And the methods used were exactly as Sarah had described: psychological pressure, ridiculously low offers, manipulation of rent values, even bribes to city inspectors to create problems with licenses and permits. All documented in internal emails he had never bothered to read before. One name appeared repeatedly as responsible for the most aggressive tactics: Mark Thompson, Vice President of Expansion. Richard knew him superficially, an ambitious man who always delivered results above the targets. He had never questioned how those results were achieved. Now, seeing the evidence on the screen, he felt ashamed of his own negligence. Eleanor would have been so angry with him. She always said that success built on the suffering of others was not real success. He used to counter that she was naive, that she didn't understand the real world of business. But who was being naive? Who was ignoring reality? At 2:00 sharp, Richard entered the boardroom. 12 executives were already seated around the mahogany table, all in impeccable suits, looking at him expectantly. Mark Thompson was at the center, a 40-year-old man with perfectly cut hair and a confident smile. "Good afternoon, everyone," Richard began, remaining on his feet. "I've called you here to discuss the Pilsen Urban Renewal Project." "Ah, that one is going very well," Mark said immediately. "We've already acquired 80% of the necessary properties. The last holdouts are being worked on. We should have everything wrapped up by the end of the month." "Worked on," Richard repeated. "Explain that word to me." Mark shrugged. "The usual tactics. We increase pressure, create inconveniences, make offers they eventually have to accept. It's standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Richard muttered. "And does that include bribing city inspectors to create false health and safety violations?" The room fell completely silent. Mark swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling, these are practices that are illegal and unethical," Richard interrupted, his voice cutting. "I've read the emails, Mark. I've seen the spreadsheets. This company is systematically destroying small businesses using methods that could land us in jail." "But sir," began another executive, Greg Davis, "from development, these communities will benefit from the project. We're going to modernize the area, create jobs, increase property values." "For whom?" Richard asked. "For the people who already live there, or for investors like us who will profit billions while evicting families who have built their lives in that place for generations?" "With all due respect, Mr. Sterling," said Mark, regaining his composure, "this has always been the way the company operates. You yourself approved these methods in other projects." Richard felt the words like a punch to the gut because they were true. "I know," he admitted. "And I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time, but that ends now." The executives looked at each other, incredulous. "Sir," said Greg carefully, "if we change our approach now, we'll lose millions. The investors will pull out. Our reputation in the market will—" "Our reputation?" Richard took a step forward. "What reputation? Of being the company that crushes small businesses? That destroys communities? That profits from the desperation of others? Is that the reputation we want?" "It's the reputation that got us here," said Mark with less caution now, a hint of defiance in his voice. "That's how you built this empire. That's how you got rich." "My wife," Richard said slowly, each word heavy, "died 3 months ago. And before she passed, she begged me to teach our daughters about real values, about humanity. I've spent the last few months numb, carrying on as things have always been, but I've woken up. And I will no longer allow this company to cause the kind of suffering we are causing." The executives looked at him as if he had gone mad. "Mr. Sterling," said the legal director, Paula Jennings, "if we cancel the project now, we'll face lawsuits. From the other investors. Contracts have been signed. Then you will work to minimize the legal damages," Richard said, "because the project is cancelled completely." "You can't just—" Mark began. "I can and I will. I am the president and majority shareholder of this company. Furthermore, I want a full audit of all our current projects. I want to know where else we are using these tactics, and I want it on my desk by Friday." "That will take weeks," Greg protested. "Then you'd better start now." Mark stood up, his face red. "This is a tremendous mistake. You're going to destroy everything you've built. The shareholders will demand your head." "Let them," Richard said calmly. "They'll have to drag me out, because I will no longer wake up every night knowing my wealth was built on the misery of others. I will no longer look at my daughters and lie that the world I'm creating for them is just." He looked around the room, meeting each executive's gaze. Some looked shocked, others furious, a few even slightly relieved, as if they had long been waiting for someone to have the courage to question it. "You have 2 choices," he continued. Either you stay and help me transform this company into something we can be proud of, or you resign and go work for some other unscrupulous corporation. The choice is yours." No one said anything for a long moment. Finally, Paula spoke. "If you're really going to do this, you'll need a solid legal strategy. I'll start working on it." "I'm in too," said Carla Hayes, the HR director. "I've always thought we could do things differently." One by one, most of the executives agreed, some with more enthusiasm than others. Mark and Greg remained silent, clearly furious. Richard knew he would have trouble with them, but he no longer cared. "Good," he said. "First order of business. I want you to contact all the property owners affected by the Pilsen project. We will offer fair compensation for the distress caused. Real market values, not those ridiculous offers. And for those who want to stay, we will guarantee they can. We will redesign the project to include the existing businesses instead of destroying them." "That will cost a fortune," Mark muttered. "Then we'll spend a fortune," Richard replied. "We have enough money. And you, Mark and Greg, are suspended, while I investigate the full extent of your actions in this and other projects. Christine will escort you to your offices to collect your personal belongings. Your system access will be blocked immediately." "This is absurd," Mark exploded, standing up. "I've been with this company for 10 years. I've always delivered results. Results obtained through questionable means, and I was complicit for too long. But it's over." Mark pointed a finger at Richard. "You'll regret this. I'll go to the shareholders. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them everything about this company's practices." "Be my guest," Richard said. "But don't forget you were the architect of those practices. So if you go down, you'll go down alone." Mark and Greg stormed out, slamming the door. The other executives remained seated, still processing everything. Richard finally sat down, feeling the weight of what had just happened. "I know this is a lot," he said. "I know I'm asking for a radical change. But I need you to understand. I can no longer live with myself knowing what we're doing. My wife died asking me to be a better person, and I'm going to honor that." Paula leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, it's a huge change, but it's the right thing to do. I'll need your full cooperation to protect the company legally while we make this transition." "You have my full support," Richard assured her. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, discussing details, strategies, deadlines. When it finally ended and everyone left, Richard was alone in the room, looking out the window at the city below. Chicago stretched as far as the eye could see. Millions of intertwined lives, millions of stories. How many of those stories had his company negatively affected? How many dreams had it destroyed in the name of profit? He thought of Sarah working double shifts while studying at night, caring for her sick mother, holding on to hope despite everything. He thought of Vera, who had dedicated 30 years of her life to feeding her community. He thought of Amelia and Clara and the world he wanted to leave for them. He picked up the phone and called Christine. "I want you to schedule a meeting with the property owners from the Pilsen project, all of them, for this week if possible, and don't send subordinates. I'm going personally." "Personally, sir?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "Personally. I need to look into the eyes of the people I almost destroyed. I need to try to fix this." The following days were a whirlwind. Mark and Greg did indeed go to the shareholders, trying to organize a vote to remove Richard from the presidency. They claimed he was having a nervous breakdown after his wife's loss, that he was not in a fit state to make decisions. Some minority shareholders sided with them, concerned about profits. But Richard held 51% of the shares. Technically, they couldn't oust him without his consent. The business press began to speculate. Articles appeared questioning the stability of Sterling Corporate, rumors of internal crisis, drastic changes in direction. The stock fell 12% in 2 days. Richard received dozens of calls from angry investors demanding explanations. But he didn't back down. Every call, every threat only strengthened his resolve. Meanwhile, Paula and the legal team worked tirelessly to mitigate the legal damage. They managed to renegotiate with most of the investors in the Pilsen project, offering compensation to exit or options to continue in a redesigned project that would benefit the community instead of destroying it. On Thursday evening, Richard arrived home exhausted. It was almost 10 p.m., and he had barely seen his daughters in the last few days. He found them still awake, waiting for him in the living room with Mrs. Gable. When they saw him, Amelia and Clara ran into his arms. "Daddy, you disappeared," Clara complained. "I'm sorry, my princesses. Daddy was working on something very important." "More important than us?" Amelia asked with the brutal honesty of children. Richard felt a pang of guilt and knelt to their level. "Nothing is more important than you. But sometimes we have to work hard to fix things that are wrong. Remember the diner we visited? Sarah?" The girls nodded excitedly. "So Daddy is working to help people like her, so they don't lose their special places." "Are we going to save the diner?" Clara asked hopefully. "I'm going to do everything in my power," Richard promised. Mrs. Gable prepared a light dinner, and Richard ate with the girls, listening to them talk about their week at school, the drawings they made, the stories they learned. For a moment he managed to forget all the corporate chaos and just be a father. It was all he needed, at that moment. On Friday morning, Richard dressed in his usual executive attire but added something different. The thrift store shirt he had worn on his first visit to the diner, carefully folded in a bag. He had a plan, but he didn't know if he would have the courage to execute it. The meeting with the Pilsen property owners was scheduled for 2 p.m. in a community hall that Sterling Corporate had rented especially. Christine had organized everything: comfortable chairs, water, coffee, a projector screen for a presentation. But Richard dismissed the projector. He didn't want charts and numbers. He wanted a real conversation. When he arrived, there were already about 30 people waiting. Shopkeepers, small business owners, some accompanied by lawyers. They all had defensive expressions, prepared for a battle. Richard recognized Vera immediately, sitting in the front row, her hands clasped in her lap. Sarah was beside her, wearing slacks and a white blouse, clearly her best clothes. When she saw him enter, her face showed confusion. "Good afternoon, everyone," Richard began, standing in front of the group instead of behind a podium. "Thank you for coming. I know you're here because my company has caused a lot of suffering in your lives in recent months, and I've come here personally to apologize." A murmur went through the group. It wasn't what they expected. Vera frowned, leaning forward. Sarah looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "My name is Richard Sterling. I am the president and founder of Sterling Corporate, and the responsibility for everything you have suffered is mine. I delegated too much. I trusted my executives too much, and that's no excuse. It was my company, my responsibility to know exactly what was being done in my name." "Why?" Vera's voice came out, strong, filled with emotion. "Why do this to us? We've worked our whole lives in these places. We've fed our families, and you come along wanting to take everything with ridiculous offers, threats, manipulations." Richard swallowed hard. "Because I was blind. Because I only looked at numbers on a spreadsheet and didn't see the people behind those numbers. Because I convinced myself that progress necessarily meant destroying the old to build the new. I was wrong. Completely wrong." A man stood up. He owned a tailor shop that had been in business for 50 years. "Nice words, Mr. Sterling, but words don't pay our bills. They don't undo the stress you've caused. My 80-year-old mother had to be hospitalized because of the pressure. That's your fault." "You're right," Richard said, holding the man's gaze. "And I can't undo what's already been done. But I can try to fix it from now on. That's why I've come to propose something different." He signaled, and Paula distributed folders with documents to everyone present. "In these documents are revised offers, fair market values for those who want to sell, but more importantly for those who want to stay, legal guarantees that you can remain. I am cancelling the demolition project. Instead, we will invest in revitalizing the neighborhood while keeping the existing businesses." The people began to flip through the documents, incredulous. A white-haired lady raised her hand. "Is this serious? It's not another manipulation?" "It's absolutely serious," Richard assured her. "My legal team has spent the whole week preparing these contracts. They are binding. There's no fine print, no tricks. It's an honest offer." Vera looked at the papers, then at Richard, then back at the papers, her eyes filled with tears. "Can I really keep my diner?" "You can. And what's more, I'm creating a community investment fund, $20 million dedicated to supporting small businesses in areas threatened by corporate expansion. You will be the first beneficiaries. Necessary renovations, new equipment, anything you need to not just survive but thrive. Why? Sarah's voice cut through the growing murmur. Why this sudden change? Businessmen like you don't just wake up one day and decide to do the right thing. Richard looked directly at her. His voice was gentle, but he knew he had to be honest. You're right, it doesn't usually happen like that. But 2 weeks ago I was in a humble diner in Pilsen, dressed in old clothes, pretending to be someone without means. I took my 2 little daughters because I wanted to teach them a lesson about empathy and gratitude. Sarah's expression changed, starting to understand. Richard continued. I only ordered the cheapest item on the menu, 2 fried eggs and a piece of toast to share with my daughters. And the waitress, who clearly works double shifts and barely has enough for herself, brought extra food. Said it was on the house. Later, when another customer humiliated us, she defended us. She treated my daughters with dignity and respect, without knowing who we were, without expecting anything in return. The hall was now in absolute silence. Sarah had turned pale, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. It was you, she whispered. Richard nodded. It was me. And Sarah, that experience changed me. I saw real kindness, real humanity. And then I discovered that my own company was about to destroy that place, to take your job, to end Vera's dream. It was the cruelest hypocrisy. I was being saved by someone I myself was destroying without even knowing. Tears were running down Sarah's face. I don't understand. Why pretend? Why not just help us from the beginning? Because I needed to understand, Richard replied. I needed to see the world beyond my bubble of privilege. My daughters needed it too. And I learned more that morning than in 42 years of life. I learned that wealth means nothing if it's built on the suffering of others. I learned that real value lies in actions when we have nothing to gain from them. Vera stood up slowly, walking over to Richard. She was much shorter than him, but at that moment she seemed huge. She looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity, for truth. My husband always said that everyone deserves a second chance, that no one is so lost they can't find themselves again. I'm going to believe you, but if this is a lie, if it's just another corporate ploy, I swear I'll fight with everything I have. It's not a lie, Richard assured her. You have my word. And what's more, I want you to be an active part of this process. I'm not just going to throw money and walk away. I want to work with you to create something that truly benefits the community. The property owners began to talk among themselves, excited, hopeful, but still cautious. Paula and other members of Richard's team circulated, answering questions, explaining the contracts, ensuring everything was legitimate. Sarah was still seated, processing everything. Richard approached her, sitting in the empty chair beside her. I know it's a lot to take in, he said gently. She looked at him, her eyes still moist. I defended you. I thought I was defending a desperate father, someone going through a hard time, but all along you were a rich man playing at being poor. Richard completed. She nodded and he sighed. I know how it looks and you're right to be angry, but my pain was real. The loss of my wife was real. The desire to teach my daughters about true values was real, and the impact you had on us was real. Amelia and Clara won't stop talking about you, about how brave and kind you were. Sarah wiped her tears. I still don't know if I can process all of this. You don't have to process it now, Richard said. But there's one more thing I want to offer you. I saw in the documents that you're studying business administration, that you dream of helping communities. I want to create a new division at Sterling Corporate, a division dedicated entirely to social investment and the protection of small businesses, and I want you to run it. Sarah looked at him as if he had spoken in another language. Me? But I'm just a waitress. I haven't even finished college yet. You're much more than that. You have something no university course teaches. You have character. You have empathy. You have real experience with the needs of the communities we want to help. I'll pay for your college, offer you a salary that allows you to stop working double shifts, cover your mother's medical treatments, and you will have real resources to make a difference. Sarah shook her head, incredulous. This is crazy. Things like this don't happen in real life. But they are happening, Richard said, because you showed me they need to happen. You saved me, Sarah. You saved not just me, but my daughters too. Now let me return the favor. Let me help you save others. Sarah asked for some time to think about the proposal. Richard understood and didn't press her. The meeting ended with most of the property owners accepting the new offers, still cautious but hopeful. Vera shook Richard's hand firmly before leaving, her eyes saying more than words could express. That night, Richard arrived home and found the girls already in their pajamas, brushing their teeth with Mrs. Gable. He helped them get ready for bed, read them stories, sang the song Eleanor used to sing. When he finally turned off the lights, Amelia held his hand. "Daddy, did you manage to help Sarah?" "I'm trying, my love. I offered her something big, but she needs to decide if she wants to accept." "She'll accept," said Clara with the absolute confidence of childhood, "because you're a good daddy and she's a good person. Good people help each other." Richard smiled in the dark, wishing the world were as simple as in the mind of a 5-year-old. But maybe it should be. Maybe all the complexity that adults created was just an excuse to avoid doing what was right. On Saturday morning, Richard woke up to his cell phone ringing. It was Sarah. "Hello?" he answered, sitting up in bed. "Mr. Sterling? Sorry to call so early. I've thought a lot about your offer. And I need to see it, with my own eyes. I need to understand if this is all real or if I'm going to wake up and find out it was a crazy dream." Richard understood perfectly. "How about we meet today? I can show you the office, introduce you to the team, explain exactly how the new division will work." "Okay, but there's one condition." "What is it?" "I want your daughters to come along. If this is about values and life lessons, they need to see the rest of the story." Richard smiled. "Deal. I'll pick you up at 10. At 10. An hour later, Richard and the girls were in front of the modest building where Sarah lived with her mother, in a working-class neighborhood on the south side. The contrast with their luxury condo was stark. Old buildings, narrow streets, tangled electrical wires in the sky. But there was life there. Children playing on the sidewalk, neighbors chatting from their windows, the smell of lunch being prepared. Sarah came down and the girls ran to hug her. She received them with a genuine smile, kneeling to their level. "Look at you. My favorite heroines, how are you?" "We're good. Daddy said you're going to work with him," Amelia said excitedly. "I don't know yet," Sarah replied honestly, "but I'm going to find out today." They got into Richard's car, an executive sedan, but not too ostentatious. During the drive to Michigan Avenue, Sarah watched everything through the window. The girls told stories non-stop, talking about school, the drawings they made, how they hoped Sarah would accept to work with their dad. When they arrived at the Sterling corporate building, Sarah looked up, impressed by the glass structure. "I never imagined I'd enter a place like this," she murmured. "It's just a building," Richard said. "What's important is what we do inside it." They went up to the 40th floor, and Christine greeted them with warm professionalism. "Mr. Sterling, everything is prepared as you requested. The boardroom is available." Richard led Sarah and the girls on a quick tour. He showed them the offices, the view of the city, the room where important decisions were made. Amelia and Clara ran ahead, already knowing the place, greeting employees who recognized them and smiled. In the boardroom, Richard had prepared a presentation, but not in corporate slides. It was something more personal, a whiteboard with handwritten ideas, photos of communities that could be helped, sketches of programs and initiatives. "I want to create something that has never existed in companies like mine," he began. "A division that doesn't aim for direct profit, but for real social impact. We will identify communities threatened by predatory corporate expansion, whether from us or others. We will offer legal, financial, and operational resources so these communities can defend themselves and prosper." Sarah studied the board attentively. "And you think I, without corporate experience, can run something like this?" "I think you're the only person who can, because you've lived on the other side. You know what these people need, not what executives in glass towers think they need. You have credibility that money can't buy. But I don't know how to handle budgets, meetings, corporate strategies. That's why you'll have a team, Richard interrupted. Paula from legal, Carla from HR, financial analysts. They will support you in everything you need. But the vision, the direction, the heart of the project that comes from you. Sarah sat in one of the chairs, processing. The girls approached her, Clara climbing onto her lap without ceremony. You have to accept, the little one said. You're special. You can help a lot of people. The waitress hugged the girl, feeling tears threaten again. When was the last time someone had called her special? When was the last time someone had believed she could be more than a hard-working waitress? My mother, she said suddenly. She's very sick. Who will take care of her while I'm working here? I've already thought about that, Richard said. We can hire a full-time nurse, and if she needs any specific treatment, we'll have the best doctors available. Your mother will have the care she deserves. Sarah looked at him, then at the girls, then at the whiteboard full of possibilities. Her whole life had been a struggle. Waking up at 5 in the morning, working late, studying at night, worrying about bills, her mother's health, the uncertain future. And now, suddenly, a door was opening. A giant door that led to a world that had always seemed impossible to reach. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared of not being good enough, scared of failing, scared that this will all fall apart. Richard sat beside her. You know what I've learned in the last few weeks? Fear means we care. If you weren't scared, it would mean you don't take this seriously. But the fact that you're scared shows you understand the responsibility, and that's exactly what this project needs. Amelia approached from the other side. Daddy's mommy always said, courage is not having fear. It's doing it even with fear. Daddy told us that. Your mother was wise, Sarah said, stroking the girl's hair. She was, Richard agreed, his voice heavy with longing. And she would be so proud to see where this lesson has led us. She would be proud of you, Sarah. At that moment, the door opened and Paula entered carrying a folder. Sorry to interrupt, but I brought the contracts you asked for, Mr. Sterling. Richard took the folder and placed it on the table in front of Sarah. Here is everything. Employment contract, benefits, details about the financing program for your education, medical coverage for your mother. You don't have to decide now. Take it home. Show it to your mother. Consult a lawyer if you want. But know that the offer is genuine and is waiting for you. Sarah opened the folder with trembling hands and began to read. Her eyes widened when she saw the numbers. The salary was more than she would earn in 5 years, working double shifts at the diner. The benefits were comprehensive, generous. It was all real, documented, signed, legal. A tear fell on the paper, and she quickly wiped it away. Sorry, she murmured. Don't be sorry, Richard said gently. Those are good tears. Sarah closed the folder and hugged it to her chest. I'll need the weekend to think. To talk to my mother, she has always helped me make important decisions. Of course, and Sarah, whatever your decision, I'm still cancelling the Pilsen project. I'm still helping Vera and the other property owners. This is not conditional on your acceptance. She nodded, grateful to know she wasn't being manipulated. Thank you for everything. They spent another hour at the office. Richard showed Sarah the space that would be hers if she accepted, introduced some of the team members who would work with her. Everyone was welcoming, genuinely enthusiastic about the idea of the new project. Some even shared their own stories of growing up in humble communities, of understanding the struggle. When they left, it was past noon. Richard suggested lunch and, to Sarah's surprise, took everyone back to Vera's diner. The girls clapped excitedly when they recognized the place. Inside, the diner was full with the Saturday crowd. Vera looked up when she saw them enter, and her face lit up. Look who showed up, my favorite customers. They sat down, and this time Richard ordered a full meal for everyone. While they waited, Sarah told Vera about the offer. The older woman listened attentively, her eyes filling with pride. My girl, she said, taking Sarah's hands. I've known you since you were a teenager. I've seen you work hard, study, take care of your mother, never lose hope even when everything seemed impossible. This opportunity isn't luck. You deserve it. You've always deserved it. But what about the diner? Who will help you here? Vera laughed. Honey, with the money from Mr. Sterling's settlement, I'll be able to hire 3 people. I can finally give my employees decent days off. You've done your part here. Now it's time to fly higher. The food arrived and they ate together, a strange mix of different worlds uniting. Around a simple table, Richard watched his daughters chat animatedly with Sarah, telling stories, laughing, just being children, without the barriers society usually imposes between social classes. "Daddy," said Amelia suddenly, "when Sarah starts working with you, can she come to our house for dinner sometimes? I want her to meet Mrs. Gable and all our toys." Richard looked at Sarah, who seemed touched by the innocent invitation. "Of course she can, if she wants to." "I'd love that," Sarah said sincerely. After lunch, Richard drove Sarah back home. During the ride, she was quiet, looking out the window clearly, lost in thought. The girls dozed off in the back seat, tired from the emotionally charged morning. When they stopped in front of Sarah's building, she didn't get out of the car immediately. She turned to Richard and asked, "Why me? Of all the people you could have chosen, why me?" Richard thought carefully before answering. "Because you showed me something I had lost sight of. You showed me that real kindness doesn't come from how much money you have, but from who you choose to be when no one is looking. You didn't help me because you expected a reward. You helped because it was the right thing to do, and that, Sarah, is more valuable than any degree or corporate experience." Sarah spent the entire weekend in contemplation. Sitting by her mother's bed, she told her everything that had happened. Her mother, Helen, a 60-year-old woman weakened by illness but strong in spirit, listened to every word attentively. "My daughter," she said when Sarah finished, holding her daughter's hand with surprising strength, "since you were little, I always knew you were destined for greater things. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you have a heart that refuses to harden even when life is tough. But Mom, what if I fail? What if I'm not capable of handling all this responsibility?" Helen smiled, that tired but loving smile only mothers can give. "Daughter, you've failed before. Remember when you tried to open that little candy shop and it didn't work out? Remember when you lost that office job because you couldn't stand how they mistreated the cleaning staff? You've fallen before. But you always got up. Always." "This is different, Mom. This is huge." "Then it's time for you to be huge too. Not for the money, not for the status, but for the people you can help. How many Sarahs are out there working 2-3 shifts, studying at night, dreaming of something better but without an opportunity? You can be their opportunity." Her mother's words echoed in Sarah's mind all Sunday. She walked through her neighborhood, observing the people, the small businesses struggling to survive, the children playing in the streets, the dreams contained on every corner. She thought about how many places like Vera's Diner existed, how many stories like hers were waiting to be written differently. On Monday morning, Sarah called Richard before the sun was even up. He answered on the second ring, his voice still sleepy. "Hello? Mr. Sterling? It's Sarah. Sorry to call so early." "It's okay." He was more alert now. "Have you decided?" "I have. I accept, but with one condition." "Which is?" "I want to start from scratch. I want to learn every department of the company, understand how everything works. I don't want to be just a pretty face in a position created out of charity. I want to earn my place." Richard smiled on the other end of the line. "You've already earned your place, Sarah, but I understand and I agree. We'll do it your way. And there's something else. I want part of the investment fund to be dedicated to scholarships for people like me who work and study, people who have potential but not the resources. Consider it done. Can you come to the office today to sign the contracts?" "I can, but I need to give notice at the diner first. I won't leave Vera in the lurch without proper notice." "Of course. Whenever you're ready." Sarah went to the diner that morning and had an emotional conversation with Vera. The older woman cried, but they were tears of joy. She hugged Sarah tightly and said she had always known that girl was special. They agreed that Sarah would work for another 2 weeks to help with the transition and train the new employees Vera would hire. During those 2 weeks, Sarah's life was a whirlwind. In the morning, she worked at the diner. In the afternoon, she went to the Sterling corporate office for meetings and training. At night, she continued her college classes. She slept little, but she was more energized than ever. She had purpose, she had direction, she had hope. Richard followed her progress closely. He was impressed with how quickly she absorbed information, with the intelligent questions she asked, with the way she connected corporate theory with street-level reality. Sarah had a natural gift for identifying problems and proposing creative solutions that no one in the company had considered. The girls loved it when Sarah visited. She had dinner with the family 3 times in those 2 weeks, and each time Amelia and Clara grew more attached to her. They showed her their toys, their drawings, their favorite books. Sarah listened with genuine attention, treating their opinions with the same respect she would give any adult. Mrs. Gable also took a quick liking to Sarah. One afternoon, while preparing coffee in the kitchen, she commented to Richard, "That young lady is special, Mr. Sterling. She has her own light. The girls need positive female figures in their lives, and she is doing them a world of good." Richard agreed, but there was something more he couldn't name. He watched Sarah interact with his daughters and felt a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something dangerously close to affection. He quickly pushed those thoughts away. It was too soon. Eleanor had been gone for only 4 months, and besides, Sarah was his employee. It would be completely inappropriate. But the heart rarely obeys logic. At the office, the transformation was happening on multiple levels. Paula and the legal team managed to renegotiate most of the problematic contracts. Mark and Greg tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, but when the evidence of their unethical practices came to light, they quickly dropped the lawsuit and disappeared from public view. The business press, initially skeptical about the changes at Sterling Corporate, began to change its tune. An article in a major business magazine highlighted the transformation as a rare example of genuine corporate conscience. Another speculated whether this could start a trend in the American real estate sector. But not everything was positive. Some shareholders still resisted, arguing that the company was sacrificing profits for idealism. There were attempts to organize an extraordinary meeting to question Richard's leadership. He faced each challenge with calm but firm resolve, always remembering why he was doing it. At the end of the second week, Sarah worked her last shift at Vera's diner. The regular customers organized a small surprise party. They brought cake, soda, small gifts. One by one, they talked about what Sarah meant to them, how her smile brightened their difficult days, how her kindness made a difference. An elderly gentleman who always ordered the cheapest daily special stood up with difficulty. "Young lady," he said with a choked voice, "you always treated me like I was important, like I mattered. In a world that usually ignores people like me, that's worth more than gold. Don't forget where you came from when you get to the top." "I'll never forget," Sarah promised, hugging the man. "You were all my family when I needed it most." Vera gave her a special gift, the apron Sarah had worn for all those years, washed and carefully ironed, wrapped in tissue paper. "So you never forget your roots," the older woman said. "So you remember that serving people, whether in a diner or a luxury office, is always honorable." Sarah cried copiously that night. She cried for the chapter that was ending, for the uncertainty of what was to come, for the overwhelming gratitude she felt. Her mother held her as she did when she was a child, whispering words of encouragement and love. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and carefully chose her outfit. Richard had helped her buy a few appropriate pieces for the corporate environment, but she had insisted on maintaining her personal style. She chose simple slacks, a discreet white blouse, and a navy blue jacket. She tied her hair in a professional bun, but left a few strands loose, a small rebellion against excessive formality. When she arrived at the Sterling corporate building as an official employee, she felt butterflies in her stomach. The security guard at the entrance greeted her by name. She had her own ID badge now. She rode the elevator to the 40th floor, where an entire suite had been prepared for her and her new team. Richard was waiting for her along with Paula, Carla, and 5 other professionals who would form the initial core of the Mendez Social Investment Division. "Good morning, Director," he said with a smile. "Director," Sarah repeated, testing the word. "It still sounds strange." "You'll get used to it," Carla assured her. The first official meeting lasted 3 hours. They discussed structure, processes, initial pilot projects. Sarah brought a completely new perspective, questioning assumptions the others took for granted, proposing approaches no one had considered. One of the first things she insisted on was creating an advisory board composed of members from the very communities they would be helping. "We're not going to decide what people need without asking them," she declared. "Every community is different. Every situation is unique. We need to listen, not just assume." The idea was met with enthusiasm. Paula immediately began working on the legal structure for this board. Carla offered to help with recruiting members. During the lunch break, Richard invited Sarah to eat in his private office. He had ordered food from Vera's diner, now undergoing renovations but still operating. When the takeout containers arrived, Sarah laughed at the care with which Vera had prepared each dish. "She sent a note," Richard said, handing her a folded piece of paper. Sarah opened it and read aloud. "My girl, never forget that greatness is not in the size of the office, but in the size of the heart. Do great things. With love, Vera." She carefully placed the note in the drawer of her new desk. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Richard asked, "How's your mother? Are the new treatments helping?" "They are. The doctor you recommended is excellent. For the first time in years, she has real hope of improvement. I can't thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me, Sarah. You gave me much more than I could ever repay. You gave me perspective, purpose. You helped me be the father my daughters need." "Your daughters are lucky to have you." "I don't know about that," he sighed. "I'm still learning. I still make a lot of mistakes. But at least now I'm trying, I'm present. That's all children really need, presence, love, example." They finished eating and Richard showed Sarah some of the other projects underway at the company. She asked insightful questions, suggested modifications, pointed out potential problems no one had noticed. Her sharp mind and practical experience formed a powerful combination. At the end of the day, when Sarah finally left the office, she was exhausted but fulfilled. She called her mother from the car Richard had insisted on providing for her. "Mum, you won't believe the day I had. Tell me everything, my daughter." And Sarah did. Every detail, every small victory, every moment of uncertainty overcome. Helen listened, with evident pride in her voice. When Sarah finished, she said, "Your father would be so proud. He always said you had a star." Sarah felt tears in her eyes, thinking of the father she had lost when she was 15. He had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. "I hope I'm making him proud up there. You are, my daughter, without a doubt." 3 weeks passed since Sarah officially started at Sterling Corporate. The social investment division was taking shape rapidly. They had already identified 8 communities in Chicago and the surrounding area facing threats similar to Pilsen's. Sarah visited each one personally, talking to residents, listening to their stories, understanding their specific needs. On one of these visits, she met Mr. Jenkins, the owner of a 4th-generation carpentry shop in Bridgeport. The 70-year-old man cried as he told her how a large construction company was trying to force him to sell his land for 1/10 of its real value. Sarah promised help and delivered. Within 2 weeks, the Sterling corporate legal team ensured that Mr. Jenkins could not only stay, but also received compensation for the months of stress and threats. The news spread. Other small business owners began to seek out Sarah's division. She handled each case with the same dedication, but quickly realized they needed more people. She talked to Richard about expanding the team. "How many people do you need?" he asked without hesitation. "At least 10 more. And I don't just want lawyers and administrators. I want social workers, community psychologists, people who understand social mobilization." "Hire them. You have a blank check." Sarah assembled a diverse and talented team. Among them was Jorge, a young black lawyer who grew up in a housing project and had a passion for social justice, and Renata, a psychologist with years of experience in community work. Together, they began to create something revolutionary in the American corporate world. Meanwhile, Richard faced his own challenges. A group of shareholders led by an investor named Alistair Blackwood organized a campaign to challenge him. They claimed Richard was destroying the company's value with his sentimental policies. They scheduled an extraordinary meeting for the end of the month. Richard wasn't worried about losing control. He had enough shares for that. But the opposition was creating instability that could harm Sarah's projects. He decided to face the situation head-on. He called a general assembly and prepared a presentation, not of abstract numbers but of real stories. He brought Mr. Jenkins to talk about how the company had saved him. He invited Vera to show photos of the diner before and after the renovations funded by Sterling Corporate. He asked Jorge to present data on the social impact of the projects. On the day of the assembly, the room was full. Shareholders, board members, representatives from the business press. Alistair Blackwood sat in the front row with a confident expression, surrounded by his allies. Richard began his presentation in an unusual way. He showed a photo of Amelia and Clara. "These are my daughters," he said. "I have built this empire thinking of leaving something for them, but I realized I was building on sand, on the suffering of other people. And what kind of legacy is that?" He then showed the numbers. The social division wasn't yet turning a direct profit, but the company's improved reputation had already resulted in new contracts, valuable partnerships, and access to government programs incentivizing social responsibility. The company wasn't losing money. It was investing differently. Alistair Blackwood stood up, interrupting. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, sentimentality doesn't pay dividends. Your shareholders deserve a return on their investment, not moral lessons." Richard faced him calmly. "Mr. Blackwood, you invested in my company because you trust my leadership. I am leading toward a sustainable future, but if you don't agree with the direction, you are free to sell your shares. In fact, I've prepared a proposal. I will buy your shares at the current market value plus 15%. Anyone else who wants out, I'm buying." A heavy silence fell over the room. 15% above market was a generous offer. Alistair hadn't expected it. He mumbled something about thinking it over, but Richard wasn't finished. "Ladies and gentlemen," he continued, addressing everyone present, "business has always been about more than money. It's about legacy. It's about the world we leave for our children. I can die tomorrow as the richest man in the cemetery, or I can live today making a real difference. I've chosen the second option. Whoever wants to join me is welcome. Whoever doesn't, I accept." The room erupted in murmurs, but then something unexpected happened. An elderly shareholder, Mrs. Beatrice, who held 5% of the shares and rarely spoke at meetings, stood up. "Mr. Sterling, I lost my husband last year. He built a fortune but died unhappy, regretting many of the things he did to get where he was. You are doing something few have the courage to do. You have my full support." Other shareholders began to speak up, some criticizing but many supporting. A young entrepreneur said that Sterling Corporate's new direction had inspired him to rethink his own practices. A fund manager commented that modern investors increasingly value companies with proven social responsibility. In the end, Alistair Blackwood's motion was overwhelmingly rejected. He and a few allies left in a fury, but Richard remained calm. He offered again to buy their shares, and after some tense negotiations led by Paula, the deal was closed. Sarah watched everything from the back row, accompanied by Jorge and Renata. When it was over, she approached Richard in the hallway. "You were incredible," she said. "It was necessary," he replied, running a hand through his tired hair. "But we did it. The company is safe. Your work is safe. It wasn't about me, it was about you defending what's right even under pressure. That's real leadership." Richard smiled, touched by her words. "I learned from the best." That night, Richard invited Sarah and the entire team to his home for dinner. He wanted to celebrate the victory and also strengthen the bonds between everyone. Amelia and Clara were thrilled to have guests. Mrs. Gable prepared a special beef stew, reminiscent of the one Sarah had served at the diner. The large dining room table was set simply, without the usual pomp. Richard wanted everyone to feel comfortable, not intimidated. Jorge arrived nervous, having never been in an apartment of that standard. Renata also seemed uncomfortable, at first, but Sarah greeted them naturally, and the girls quickly broke any remaining tension. Clara dragged Jorge to see her book collection, while Amelia showed her drawings to Renata. During dinner, they talked about everything but work. Childhood stories, favorite songs, dreams, and aspirations. Richard discovered that Jorge played the guitar and invited him to play later. Paula revealed she took dance classes on Saturdays. Carla talked about her project of writing a book on women in corporate leadership. Sarah watched everything with a smile on her face. This was more than a team. It was becoming a professional family, united by a common purpose and mutual respect. But her gaze often drifted to Richard, noticing how he interacted with his daughters, how he listened to each person with genuine attention, how his smile lit up the room. She found herself thinking about him more than she should. She quickly pushed those thoughts away, reminding herself that he was her boss, that he had just lost his wife, that there was a huge social distance between them despite everything else. But the heart rarely listens to reason. Richard also noticed Sarah, how she made everyone feel included, how her laughter was genuine, how she treated the girls with a kindness that went beyond professional courtesy. He felt something growing inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Immediate guilt came with it. Eleanor had been gone for only 5 months. It was too soon, too inappropriate. But Amelia, with the keen perception of children, noticed something. When everyone had left and the girls were getting ready for bed, she asked, "Daddy, do you like Sarah?" Richard choked on the water he was drinking. "What? Of course. She's a wonderful person." "No, Daddy." "Do you like her like you liked Mommy?" The silence that followed was heavy. Richard sat on the edge of Amelia's bed, choosing his words carefully. "My love, Mommy will always be special. Nothing and no one can change the love I had and have for her. But people can have room in their hearts for more love. It's not love that replaces. It's love that grows alongside. Do you understand?" Amelia thought for a moment. "Like when Clara was born. You didn't stop loving me, you just loved her too." "Exactly that, my wise one, exactly that." "Then it's okay if you like Sarah. Mommy would want you to be happy." Richard felt tears burn his eyes. He hugged his daughter tightly. "You're amazing, you know that." "I know," Amelia replied with the typical modesty of a 6-year-old, making Richard laugh through his tears. Later, alone in his room, Richard thought about the conversation. Was it possible? Was he allowed to feel something new without betraying Eleanor's memory? She had always said she wanted him to be happy, that if something happened to her, she didn't want him to be alone forever. But saying it was easy, doing it was a completely different story. He picked up Eleanor's photo from the nightstand. He looked at her smile, at the eyes he had loved so much. "What do you think?" he asked aloud. "Am I crazy? Am I being selfish?" The silence of the room held no answers. But somehow Richard felt a strange peace, as if Eleanor were giving him permission, saying it was okay to move on, that life was for living, not just surviving. He wouldn't rush anything. He wouldn't force anything. But he also wouldn't fight against the feelings that were beginning to blossom anymore. He would let life take its course. He would be open to whatever came. It was all he could do. Across the city, in her simple apartment, Sarah was also awake. She was thinking about Richard, the girls, the strange life she was now living. Everything had changed so quickly. Sometimes she would wake up at night thinking it was all an elaborate dream, but then she would look around, see the new clothes in the closet, the company laptop on the desk, the documents for her mother's new health plan, and know it was real. Her mother slept in the next room, breathing more, easily now thanks to the new medication. Hearing that quiet breathing filled Sarah with gratitude. It had all been worth it, every sacrifice, every extra shift, every sleepless night studying. It had brought her here. But there was more now. There was a sense of being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. And there was Richard. Complicated, wonderful, impossible Richard. She didn't allow herself to fantasize much. She knew her place. But she couldn't deny that he was occupying more and more space in her thoughts. 2 months passed. The social investment division at Sterling Corporate was flourishing. They had helped 23 small businesses stay open, created a micro-loan program for entrepreneurs from underserved communities, and established partnerships with universities to offer free vocational courses. Sarah was constantly being interviewed by newspapers and magazines, becoming a public face of the company's new identity. But success brought its own challenges. Sarah worked 14, sometimes 16 hours a day. She came home late, left early. Her mother, although improving, worried about her exhaustive pace, and Sarah herself felt the weight. It wasn't just physical fatigue, it was emotional. Every story she heard, every person. She tried to help, carried a piece of pain that she absorbed. One Thursday afternoon, she was in the middle of a meeting when she started to feel dizzy. Jorge's words seemed to come from far away. The room spun slightly. She tried to stand up, and her legs failed her. The last thing she saw before she fainted was Renata's worried face. She woke up in the hospital an hour later. Richard was sitting by her bed, holding her hand, his face etched with worry. When he saw her open her eyes, he let out a deep sigh of relief. "You gave me a terrible scare," he said. "What happened?" "You fainted. Exhaustion, according to the doctor. When was the last time you ate properly? Or slept a full night?" Sarah tried to remember and couldn't. I have so much work. So many people needing help. And you can't help anyone if you destroy your own health, Richard said firmly. You're doing exactly what I used to do, working until you break, forgetting that you're human too. But people depend on me. And you depend on yourself, he interrupted. Sarah, look at me. You're amazing. You're brilliant. But you're not superhuman. You need rest, you need balance, otherwise you'll burn out completely and won't be able to help anyone. Tears began to slide down her face. I want to make a difference. I want to prove I deserve this opportunity. Richard squeezed her hand tighter. You've already proven it, 1,000 times over. No one questions your value, but you need to learn to take care of yourself too. Promise? She nodded, too exhausted to argue. The doctor came in, confirmed it was exhaustion and dehydration, and recommended a few days of absolute rest. Richard insisted, on taking her home personally. On the way, Sarah looked out the window in silence. Richard drove, casting worried glances at her from time to time. You know, he said finally, Eleanor used to tell me I needed to slow down. That success meant nothing if it killed me in the process. I never listened. I thought it was weakness, a lack of dedication. And then she was gone, and I realized how much time I wasted, how much time I could have spent with her but chose to spend at the office. Sarah turned to look at him. Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have known. No, I couldn't have, but you can. You still have time to do it differently, to do better. They arrived at Sarah's building, and Richard helped her up. Helen was waiting, having been notified by the hospital. She hugged her daughter tightly, lovingly scolding her for working too much. Richard explained the doctor's orders, and Helen assured him she would see they were followed. Before leaving, Richard held Sarah's shoulder. I'm giving you a few mandatory days off, no discussion, and when you come back, we're going to reorganize your work. I'm bringing in 2 more managers to share the load. You're going to delegate more. But, no buts, he smiled gently. Boss's orders. After he left, Helen made tea and sat with her daughter. That man cares a great deal for you, she observed. He cares about all his employees, Sarah replied too quickly. Helen gave a knowing smile. If you say so, my daughter. If you say so. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to rest, but it was difficult. She was used to constant motion, to always being busy. The quiet made her restless. She read, watched movies, spent time with her mother, but her mind always returned to work. On the 3rd day, the doorbell rang. It was Richard with Amelia and Clara. The girls ran to hug Sarah, bringing flowers they had picked themselves and drawings they had made for her. We came to visit, Clara announced. Daddy said you're sick. Not sick exactly, just needing to rest, Sarah explained, touched by the visit. Helen invited them in and offered coffee. Amelia and Clara explored the small apartment with respectful curiosity. Very different from the spacious home they lived in. But they made no comments, just appreciated every detail as if it were special. You live near a park, Amelia observed, looking out the window. Can we play there later? "If Sarah is feeling up to it," Richard replied. "I am," Sarah assured him, already feeling better just from their presence. They all went to the small park in the square. While the girls played on the playground, Richard and Sarah sat on a bench in the shade. Helen had stayed at the apartment, saying she wanted to give the young people some privacy, with a mischievous look that made Sarah blush. "Thanks for coming," Sarah said. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Richard replied simply. "The girls did too. They adore you, you know." "I adore them too. They're incredible kids." "They take after their mother," he smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. "Eleanor was amazing with children. Natural, patient, loving. Sometimes I worry if I'm managing to be enough for them." "You are," Sarah assured him. "They're happy, loved, cared for. That's all that matters." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the girls play. There was a comfortable intimacy in that silence, an understanding that went beyond words. Richard felt the urge to take Sarah's hand, but he resisted. It was too soon, too complicated. "Sarah," he said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Are you seeing anyone? A boyfriend? Someone special?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "No, I've never had time. Between work, studies, and taking care of my mother, relationships have always taken a back seat." "Doesn't it get lonely?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But being lonely is better than being with the wrong person for the wrong reasons. My mother always said that. She said that when the right time came, with the right person, I would know, that it wouldn't be forced." "She's a wise woman." "She is," Sarah smiled. "And you? Have you thought about meeting someone?" "Eventually." Richard took a moment to answer, choosing his words carefully. "Eleanor made me promise I wouldn't be alone forever, that I would try to be happy again. At the time I promised just to calm her. I didn't think it would be possible. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe she was right, that closing off my heart would be wasting the life I still have." Sarah's eyes met his, and there was a spark, a mutual recognition of something unsaid but felt. The moment was interrupted by Clara running up to them. "Daddy! Sarah! Look what I can do on the jungle gym." They watched Clara's enthusiastic demonstration, clapping and praising her. But something had changed. A line had been crossed, not physically but emotionally. They both knew that something was growing between them, something delicate and precious, but also frightening. When they returned to the apartment, Helen had prepared cake. They all ate together at the small kitchen table, which barely fit them all. It was cramped, simple but cozy in a way. Richard's luxurious apartment rarely was. Before leaving, Richard spoke briefly with Helen, while Sarah showed the girls more drawings. "Sir, you are good for my daughter," Helen said directly. "And I'm not speaking as her boss. I'm speaking as a person. She smiles differently when you're around." Richard was speechless for a moment. "Helen, You don't need to explain anything," she interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know. My daughter has spent her life taking care of others. She deserves someone who will take care of her too, someone who sees how special she is." "I do see," Richard assured her. "Believe me, I do." On the way home, Amelia commented, "I liked Sarah's house. It's small, but it has love." Out of the mouths of babes, Richard thought. His daughter, without knowing it, had perfectly captured the difference between having things and having a life, between space and warmth, between luxury and home. That night, lying in bed, Richard finally admitted it to himself. He was falling in love with Sarah. It wasn't something he had planned, not something he had sought, but it was happening as natural and inevitable as the changing of the seasons. The question was, what to do about it? Across the city, Sarah couldn't sleep either. She thought about Richard, the girls, the wonderful afternoon they had. She thought about the way he looked at her, how his presence made her feel safe and valued. But she also thought about the obstacles. He was her boss. He was rich while she came from poverty. He was a recent widower, still grieving. He was a father of 2 girls who needed stability, not complications. Perhaps it was better to ignore the feelings, to focus only on work, to maintain a professional distance. It would be the wisest, the safest thing to do. But when has the heart ever cared about what was wise or safe? Sarah returned to work the following Monday, refreshed but with a new perspective. Following Richard's orders, she began to delegate more. They hired 2 additional managers, Marina and Tiago, both with experience in the non-profit sector and a genuine passion for the cause. The workload became more balanced, and Sarah could finally breathe. But the dynamic between her and Richard had subtly changed, glances that lasted a second longer, smiles that carried unspoken meanings, physical proximity that seemed natural but made both their hearts race. The team began to notice, exchanging meaningful looks, but no one commented openly. One Friday afternoon, 3 weeks after the visit to Sarah's apartment, Richard called her into his office. When she entered, she noticed he seemed nervous, which was unusual. He had always been so composed, so confident. "Sit, please," he said, gesturing to the comfortable armchairs near the window, not the formal chair in front of his desk. It was a gesture that indicated a personal, not professional conversation. Sarah sat, curious and a little apprehensive. "Did something happen?" "No, nothing. Bad, I need to talk about something that's been consuming me for weeks, and if I don't say it now, I think I'm going to explode." He sat in the armchair next to her, not behind his desk. He turned to face her directly. "Sarah, since that day at the diner, my life has changed completely. You showed me things about myself I didn't know existed. You helped me be a better father, a better person, and in the process, something happened that I wasn't planning." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. Richard continued, his voice low but firm. "I've fallen in love with you. I know it's complicated. I know I'm your boss, that there's the difference in our backgrounds, that Eleanor passed away only 6 months ago. I know all the reasons why this is crazy, but I can't pretend I don't feel it anymore." Tears instantly filled Sarah's eyes. "Richard, You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest. If you don't feel the same, we'll forget this conversation ever happened and continue as before, I promise it. They won't affect your work, it won't change anything professionally." "But I do," she interrupted, the words coming out in a whisper. "I feel the same way, and I'm terrified." Richard let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. "You do?" "I do. I tried not to. I tried to just focus on work, to keep an emotional distance. But you and your daughters, you've entered my heart in a way I can't control." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Sarah, I don't want to rush anything. I don't want you to feel pressured. But I also don't want to waste the chance for something real. Life is too short. Eleanor taught me that in the worst possible way." She squeezed his hand back. "What do we do then?" "Let's take it slow. No pressure, no heavy expectations. Occasional dinners, conversations, getting to know each other outside of work. See if what we're feeling is real, or if it's just, I don't know, misplaced gratitude or something." "It's not gratitude," Sarah said firmly. "I know the difference. This is real. Scary, but real." They stayed like that for a moment, hands clasped, looking at each other, finally allowing themselves to acknowledge what had been growing between them. It was Richard who broke the silence. "The girls are going to be ecstatic. They adore you." Sarah laughed through her tears. "I love them too. They're amazing. So, shall we try? Slowly, at our own pace?" "Let's try." Their first official date was the following Saturday. Richard took Sarah to a discreet restaurant, far from the luxury social circuits he usually frequented. It was a cozy place in Little Italy, with homemade Italian food and tables too close together, perfect for intimate conversations. They talked for hours, about childhood dreams, fears, regrets. Richard spoke about Eleanor without reservation, about the love they had, about how he was learning that loving someone new didn't mean forgetting who was gone. Sarah talked about the father she had lost young, about the hardships she had faced, about how she had almost given up several times, but always found the strength to continue. When Richard took her home, he stopped the car in front of her building, but didn't get out immediately. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for giving me this chance." "Thank you," she replied, "for being brave, enough to say what you feel." They looked at each other and the moment stretched. Richard leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, but Sarah didn't pull back. Their lips met in a soft, careful kiss, full of promise and possibility. When they parted, they were both smiling. In the following weeks, their relationship blossomed. They maintained discretion at the office, impeccable professionalism. But outside of work, they spent more and more time together. Sarah had dinner with Richard and the girls at least twice a week. Amelia and Clara were overjoyed, treating Sarah like part of the family. Helen also fully approved. When she properly met Richard during a dinner at their apartment, she spoke with him at length. She liked what she saw, a genuine man who treated her daughter with respect and affection, who didn't try to impress but simply be himself. The work also thrived. The social investment division was being studied as a model by other companies. Sarah was invited to speak at universities. Richard received awards for corporate social responsibility. But the most important thing was the real impact. Hundreds of small businesses saved, thousands of jobs preserved, entire communities revitalized. One day, 3 months after that first kiss, Richard took Sarah and the girls for a walk in Millennium Park. It was a sunny summer Sunday. They had a picnic on the grass. The girls ran around chasing pigeons. It was a perfect, simple day. While they rested under a tree, Clara lying in Sarah's lap and Amelia leaning against her father, the little one asked, "Is Sarah going to be our new mommy?" The silence that followed was heavy. Richard and Sarah looked at each other, surprised by the directness of the question. It was Sarah who answered, choosing her words carefully. "My love, no one can replace your mommy. She will always be your mother and will always be in your hearts. But I can be someone who loves you too. Someone who takes care of you and is here for you." "Would that be good?" Amelia thought for a moment. "Like having two mommies, one in heaven and one here." "Exactly like that," Richard agreed, emotional. "Then it's okay," Amelia decided. "We like you. You're nice." "Very nice," Clara agreed, snuggling closer into Sarah's lap. That night, after dropping Sarah off, Richard had a long talk with the girls before they went to sleep. He explained that he and Sarah were dating, that it didn't mean forgetting their mother, that love wasn't limited, but expansive. The girls, with the natural acceptance of childhood, received the news with pure joy. When he finally lay down in his own bed, Richard looked at Eleanor's photo on the nightstand. "I hope you approve," he whispered. "She's special. Different from you, but special in her own way. And she loves the girls. She really loves them." There was no reply, of course, but Richard felt that peace again, that feeling that everything was okay, that he was on the right path. Eleanor would surely approve. She always wanted him to be happy, for the girls to have love in their lives. And now they did. But happiness, Richard was about to discover, rarely comes without challenges. And a very specific challenge was about to reappear in their lives, bringing with it the opportunity for one final lesson on consequences and choices. The following Monday, Richard was in his office when Christine entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, there's a Marcus Thorne in reception. He says he needs to speak with you urgently about a business opportunity." Richard frowned. Marcus Thorne, the man who had humiliated them at the diner months ago. What could he possibly want? "Send him up," Richard decided. "I want to see what he has to say." 10 minutes later, Marcus entered the office with the same arrogance as always. He wore another expensive suit, another shiny Rolex, another smug smile. He clearly didn't recognize Richard from the thrift store clothes he had worn that day. "Mr. Sterling, what a pleasure to finally meet you in person. I'm Marcus Thorne, Director of Expansion at Blackwood Construction. I have a proposal that I'm sure will interest you." Richard leaned back in his chair, his fingers laced on the desk. "Have a seat. I'm curious to hear it." Marcus sat, opening his briefcase and spreading documents on the table. "We're developing a mega project on the west side, but we know about your new social investment division. I thought we could form a partnership. You handle the PR side, make it look like we're helping the community, and we do the real development work. Everyone wins." "Interesting," Richard said, his voice neutral. "And what would the real development work be?" Marcus gave that smile he knew so well, the smile of someone who thinks they're being clever. "Well, we buy up the land for low prices, resettle the people to more distant areas, build something profitable. The usual. But with your help, we can make it look like a social initiative. It's genius, really." Richard felt anger boil inside him, but kept his expression calm. "Tell me something, Marcus. Do you remember going to a humble diner in Pilsen about 4 months ago?" Marcus blinked, confused by the change of subject. "A diner? I don't know. I go to so many places." "Let me refresh your memory. You humiliated a man and his 2 young daughters. You called him irresponsible for only being able to afford 2 fried eggs to share with his children. You were extremely rude to the waitress who tried to defend them." Marcus's face paled slightly as he tried to process. "Oh, that awful place. Yes, I vaguely remember. But what does that have to do with—" "That man," Richard interrupted, standing up slowly, "was me. Those 2 little girls were my daughters. And the waitress you treated like trash is now the director of my social investment division." Marcus froze, the color draining completely from his face. "What? No, wait. You can't be— You were dressed like someone with no money," Richard completed, his voice icy. "Exactly. I was teaching my daughters a lesson about empathy. And you, Marcus, became the perfect example of everything that's wrong with people like us. Arrogance, lack of compassion, contempt for those you consider inferior." "Mr. Sterling, It was a misunderstanding," Marcus stammered now, trying to recover. "I was having a bad day. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to humiliate a father in front of his young daughters. You didn't mean to ridicule someone in public. Of course you did. That's exactly what you did. And you know what I learned that day? That there are 2 types of people in the world. People like Sarah, the waitress you despised, who use what little they have to help others without expecting anything in return. And people like you, who use their positions to crush those they consider weaker." Marcus tried to stand, but Richard raised a hand. "Sit. I'm not finished. You came here to offer me a partnership that basically consists of using my new reputation to cover up the same predatory practices I've abandoned. Practices that men like you perpetuate without the slightest remorse. Did you really think I would agree?" "Look, maybe we can renegotiate the terms." Marcus was sweating now. "We can do something more legitimate." "You don't get it. There is no negotiation. There is no partnership. You don't understand what I'm building because you've never cared about anything but profit. And you know what's even more interesting? Your company, Blackwood Construction, is the same one that was trying to destroy Vera's diner. The same one that uses the tactics you just so proudly described to me. How do you— Because when I decided to change my company, I investigated everything, including who our competitors were and what methods they used. Your company is under investigation by 3 different regulatory bodies for unethical practices. I myself sent anonymous tips to the relevant authorities." "You can't do that," Marcus exploded. "That's corporate sabotage." "It's not sabotage when you're simply reporting crimes," Richard replied calmly. "And it wasn't just me. Several of the families you tried to illegally evict have filed complaints. Vera, the owner of the diner, is suing you, and she has a very good legal team, pro bono, courtesy of my company." Marcus was as pale as a ghost now. "You have no idea what you're doing. Alistair Blackwood has connections. He will ruin you." "Alistair Blackwood," Richard said, "was one of the shareholders who tried to oust me as president. It didn't work. And since then he's been losing contracts all over the city, because when serious companies find out about his methods, they don't want to be associated. Reputation, Marcus, is more valuable than money, and you've destroyed yours." At that moment, the office door opened and Sarah entered with a folder. "Sorry to interrupt, but I brought the documents you asked for about—" She stopped when she saw Marcus. "Oh, hello again." Marcus recognized her, and something in him seemed to break. "You, the waitress. Now you're a director. This is ridiculous." "It's Sarah," Richard corrected, "and she has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. She built a division that has already helped more than 50 small businesses survive predators like you. She is an example of what someone can do when given an opportunity, and has the character to seize it. Sarah looked at Marcus with a mixture of pity and firmness. Mr. Thorne, that day at the diner, you said it was sad that a father couldn't properly feed his daughters. Do you know what's really sad? It's someone with all the resources in the world choosing to use those resources to destroy instead of build, to hurt instead of help. You had a choice. You always did. And you chose to be cruel. Marcus stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. You'll all regret this, all of you. No, Marcus, Richard said. There's the one who will regret it is you, because you're about to find out that consequences are real. That partnership proposal of yours, I recorded the entire conversation. It's legal in the state of Illinois, and I'm going to use it as additional evidence of your practices. I'll send it to every client you have, every investor, every relevant regulatory body. You can't. I can and I will, because men like you need to learn that you can't just destroy lives without consequences. Now get out of my office, and Marcus, don't ever come back. Marcus stormed out, but without the arrogance he had entered with. He was broken, defeated, and he knew it. When the door closed, Richard sat down heavily in his chair. Sarah approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? I am. Just tired of men like that. Tired of seeing how much damage they cause without the slightest remorse. But you stopped him, and you'll prevent him from continuing to do this to other people. Richard covered her hand with his. We'll stop him. Together. In the following weeks, the consequences for Marcus and Blackwood Construction were severe. Richard's recordings, combined with the ongoing investigations, resulted in both criminal and civil lawsuits. Alistair Blackwood tried to distance himself from Marcus, blaming him for everything, but it was too late. The entire company was tainted. Several contracts were cancelled. Investors pulled out. The company that was once a powerhouse in the Chicago real estate market began to crumble. Marcus was publicly fired, his name associated with scandals and unethical practices. His career in the sector was over. One afternoon, Richard read about all this in the newspaper while having coffee in his office. Sarah was sitting across the table from him, reviewing proposals for new projects. Do you feel sorry for him? She asked. Richard thought carefully. Not exactly sorry, but I don't feel joy either. I feel relief. Relief that a predator has been stopped, but also a sadness that it had to come to this, that he never learned, never changed. Some people don't change, Sarah said, no matter how many opportunities they have. And others change completely. He looked at her with affection. Like me. You always had the potential to be good. You just needed to remember it. That night, Richard had dinner at home with the girls and Sarah. It was a Friday, and they had established a tradition of family dinners every Friday. Mrs. Gable always prepared something special, and they would eat together, talking about their week, laughing, planning the weekend. Daddy, said Amelia during dessert, the teacher asked us to do a project about heroes. Can I do it about you and Sarah? Richard and Sarah looked at each other, touched. Of course you can, my love, but why do you think we're heroes? Because you help people, just like real heroes, but without capes. Clara agreed enthusiastically. And because you're nice, heroes are always nice. After the girls went to sleep, Richard and Sarah stood on the balcony, looking at the lights of Chicago stretching to the horizon. He hugged her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. Have you ever thought, he began, how radically our lives have changed in less than a year? I think about it every day, she admitted. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real. It's real. You're real. We're real. She turned in his arms, looking him in the eyes. Richard, I need to tell you something. His heart sped up. Go on. I love you. I know it's fast. I know there's all the complexity of our situation, but I need you to know. I love you. I love your daughters. I love the life we're building together. Richard felt tears burn his eyes. I love you too. I've loved you for months, but I was afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon, too complicated. It is soon. It is complicated, but it's real. They kissed there, under the starry Chicago sky, as the city pulsed around them. It was a perfect moment of accepted imperfections, of love found in the most unlikely of circumstances. A few days later, Richard received a call from Vera. "Mr. Richard, I have some news. The diner won the lawsuit against Blackwood Construction. They're going to have to pay compensation and all the costs of the renovations I had to do because of their intimidation. I can't believe we did it. Congratulations, Vera. You fought and you won. That's incredible. I couldn't have done it without your help, without Sarah. You changed my life. You changed the life of the whole neighborhood." "You changed mine too," Richard said sincerely, "more than you can imagine." When he hung up, Richard knew it was time to take the next step. A step he had been considering for weeks but waiting for the right moment. He looked at the calendar. In 2 weeks, it would be the 1-year anniversary of their first visit to the diner. The perfect moment. He began to plan, with that meticulous attention to detail that had always characterized his best projects. But this time, it wasn't a business project. It was something infinitely more personal and infinitely more important. The Saturday dawned clear and sunny, typical of a spring day in Chicago. Richard woke, up early, anxious and nervous in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. Today was the day. Everything was planned, every detail considered. He just hoped it would all go as he had imagined. The girls were excited, knowing something special was happening, but not understanding exactly what. Richard helped them get dressed, choosing pretty but comfortable clothes. He himself wore smart casual attire, nothing too formal, but appropriate for the occasion. Sarah arrived at 10 o'clock as arranged. She looked beautiful in a simple light blue dress that highlighted her eyes. She also knew it was a special day, but Richard hadn't revealed all the details, only saying he had a surprise. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Clara asked as they got into the car. "It's a surprise, my daughter, but we're going to a very special place, a place where it all began." Amelia, always more perceptive, looked at Sarah and then at her father. "Are we going to Vera's diner?" "We are," Richard confirmed. "But it's not just any day. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the first time we went there." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "Has it already been a year? How time has flown." "And how everything has changed," Richard added, taking her hand. During the drive to Pilsen, Richard told the girls the whole story from the beginning. How he had decided to teach them about empathy and gratitude, how he had randomly chosen that diner, how they had met Sarah. The girls listened, fascinated, even though they had heard parts of the story before. It was different hearing it in its entirety, understanding how each piece had fit together to lead them to this moment. When they arrived in the neighborhood, they noticed immediate changes. The street was cleaner. Several shops had been renovated. There was a new small playground in the square. Sarah's division had invested in revitalizing the entire area, not just individual businesses. Vera's diner was completely transformed. The facade had been painted. The sign was now professional and illuminated, but maintained its homely charm. Through the clean windows, they could see the renovated interior. New tables that kept the simple style, walls painted in warm and welcoming colors, old photos of the neighborhood framed on the walls. When they entered, they were greeted with applause. Richard had asked for absolute secrecy, but Vera had organized a small gathering of special people. Mr. Jenkins from the carpentry shop was there. Several of the families Sarah's division had helped, members of the Sterling corporate team, including Paula, Carla, Jorge, and Renata. Even Helen was there, in her wheelchair, looking much healthier than months before. Sarah put a hand to her mouth, emotional. "Richard, what is all this?" "You'll see," he smiled mysteriously. Vera led them to a special table in the center of the diner. It was the same table where they had sat on that first day, but now it had a discreet flower arrangement. Richard helped. Sarah sit, then settled the girls beside her and finally sat across from them. "1 year ago," he began, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I came to this place completely lost. I had just lost my wife. I was disconnected from my daughters. I was building a fortune on the misery of other people without even realizing it. I came here to teach my daughters a lesson, but I was the one who learned. I learned about real humanity, about selfless kindness, about what truly matters in life. Sarah watched him, tears already forming in her eyes. Richard continued, "That day, I ordered only 2 fried eggs and a piece of toast to share with my daughters, and an extraordinary waitress, working double shifts to care for her sick mother while studying, brought us extra food. She said it was on the house. She defended us when we were humiliated. She treated my daughters with dignity and respect, and in that moment, without knowing it, she saved not just that day, but our entire lives." He signaled, and Vera brought a plate. On it, exactly as on that first day, were 2 fried eggs, a piece of toast, and 3 glasses of water. Sarah laughed through her tears, remembering. "Today," Richard said, "I order the same meal again, not because it's all I can afford, but because I want to remember where we came from. I want to remember the lesson I learned, that true value is not in what you have, but in what you do with what you have. It's in the compassion you show when you have nothing to gain." He stood up slowly, and everyone in the diner fell completely silent. He walked over to Sarah's side and knelt beside her chair. He took a small box from his pocket. "Sarah, you changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You taught me to see the world with new eyes. You helped me be the father my daughters deserve. You showed me that real success is not measured in money, but in the positive impact on other people's lives. And in the process, I fell completely in love with you, for your strength, your kindness, your unwavering integrity." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. It wasn't ostentatious, it didn't have huge diamonds, it was delicate and beautiful, chosen with Sarah's taste in mind, not to impress. "Sarah, will you honor me by being my wife, by building a family with my daughters and me, by continuing this journey together, changing the world one person, one business, one community at a time?" Sarah was now crying openly. She looked at the girls, who were nodding enthusiastically, then at Helen, who was wiping her own tears while smiling, then back at Richard. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The diner erupted in applause and cheers of joy. Richard slid the ring onto Sarah's finger and kissed her, while Amelia and Clara jumped around them. Vera was crying, hugged by Mr. Jenkins. The Sterling corporate team celebrated. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. When they finally separated, Sarah held Richard's face in both her hands. "You're amazing. This was perfect. Completely perfect." "You deserve perfect," he said. "You deserve everything good the world has to offer." They ate the fried eggs and toast, sharing it among the 4 of them as they had on that first day. But now it wasn't out of necessity or for a lesson. It was a celebration, it was a memory, it was an acknowledgement of how far they had come. After the meal, Richard stood up again to make an announcement. "I have one more thing to share. Sarah and I have discussed the future of the Social Investment Division at length, and we've decided to expand it, not just in Chicago, but across the country. We are going to create the Eleanor Sterling Foundation in honor of my late wife, dedicated to protecting small businesses and empowering communities." Sarah continued. "And it won't just be from Sterling Corporate. We will seek other investors, other companies that want to make a real difference. We will create a national support network, and the first regional office will be here in this neighborhood, in this community that taught us so much." The applause was even louder. Vera announced that lunch was on the house for everyone, and a real party began. Music was played, people danced, stories were told. Amelia and Clara played with other children, completely at home in an environment that had been so strange to them a year ago. Richard watched everything from the table, Sarah by his side, his fiancée now. He thought of Eleanor, of how proud she would be. Not just proud of the changes in the company or the social projects, but mostly of seeing that he had learned to truly live, to love again, to be present for his daughters. At night, after everyone had left and the diner had closed, Richard, Sarah, and the girls stayed a little longer. Vera served coffee and cake, sitting with them for the first time, not as the owner of the establishment, but as family. "You know," the older woman said, "my late husband always said that some places are magical. Not because of the decor or the food, but because of the connections they create between people. This diner has always been like that, and you've proven it." "This place changed our lives," Sarah said. "It will always be special to us." "Will you get married here?" Vera asked hopefully. Richard and Sarah looked at each other, smiling. They hadn't discussed the details yet, but in that moment, they both knew the answer. "Of course we will," they replied in unison. A month later, that's exactly what they did. A simple but beautiful ceremony, in the diner decorated with flowers and love. Amelia and Clara were flower girls, in dresses they had chosen themselves. Helen cried the whole time, as did Mrs. Gable. The entire Sterling corporate team was there, along with dozens of people from the communities they had helped. Richard wore the same suit he had worn on his first official date with Sarah. She wore a simple, elegant dress, with the diner apron, her old waitress apron, discreetly sewn into the lining as something old, a reminder of where she started. When they exchanged vows, they were not rehearsed words. They were sincere promises of partnership, of love, of commitment, not just to each other, but to the mission they shared of making the world a little better. The party lasted late into the night, with music, dancing, and plenty of homemade food prepared by Vera and her new expanded team. It was a celebration not just of a wedding, but of everything they had built together, of all the lives they had touched, of all the difference they had made. Months passed. The Eleanor Sterling Foundation grew beyond their most optimistic expectations. They opened offices in 10 American cities in the first year. They helped over 500 small businesses. They created mentorship programs, microloans, free legal assistance. Other companies began to follow their example, creating their own genuine social responsibility divisions. Richard and Sarah worked as equal partners, complementing each other's strengths. She with her connection to the communities and practical understanding of their needs. He with his corporate experience and ability to navigate complex systems. Together, they were unstoppable. The girls flourished. Amelia was more confident, more aware of the world around her. Clara was loving and empathetic, always wanting to help. They both called Sarah Mom now, naturally, effortlessly, and Eleanor remained present in their memories, honored but not limiting, as Richard had explained, love doesn't replace, it expands. One Saturday afternoon, a year after their wedding, the family returned to Vera's diner. It was a tradition now to visit at least once a month. Richard, as he always did, ordered 2 fried eggs, a piece of toast and water. Not because he needed to, but because he chose to remember. He chose to stay connected to that fundamental lesson that had changed everything. As they shared the simple meal, Amelia asked, "Daddy, do you think Mommy Eleanor would be happy with all this?" Richard looked at his daughters, at Sarah, at the diner full of life and community around them. "I'm absolutely sure she would be, my daughter, because we learned what she always wanted to teach us. That true wealth is not in what we keep for ourselves, but in what we share with others. That real success is measured in smiles, in opportunities created, in lives transformed." Sarah squeezed his hand across the table. "And in love. Don't forget love." "And in love," Richard agreed. "Always in love." They left the diner that sunny afternoon, a family brought together by fate but strengthened by choice. Richard looked back, one last time, at that humble place that had become the cradle of his transformation. He smiled, grateful for every moment, every lesson, every opportunity to do better. Life, he had realized, was not about accumulating wealth or power. It was about moments of genuine connection, about making a difference in the lives of others, about loving and being loved. It was about 2 fried eggs shared with generosity, about defending strangers without expecting anything in return, about giving opportunities to those who deserve them but rarely receive them. It was about being human, completely, imperfectly, and wonderfully human. N.D. Of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Richard, Sarah, Amelia, and Clara has touched your hearts in the same way writing it touched ours. This journey reminds us that real transformation begins when we choose to see beyond our own circumstances, when we extend a hand to those in need, when we allow acts of kindness to change not only the receiver, but especially the giver. The story of a businessman who pretended to be poor and discovered true wealth teaches us that life's greatest treasures are not wrapped in luxury, but in simple moments of genuine humanity. If this narrative inspired you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories that bring valuable lessons about compassion, second chances, and the transformative power of love in its various forms. Leave a like if the story of Richard and Sarah resonated with you, and don't forget to comment below telling us which moment moved you the most or what lesson you will take from this story into your own life. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the challenges, joys, and complexity of human relationships. We've already prepared a special playlist with other equally captivating stories about personal transformation and social justice that you can find by clicking here on the side. Your participation in the comments helps other listeners find these stories, and together we create a community of people who believe that the world can be a better place, one story and one action at a time. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, and until the next story,